Hey everyone, this is Chris Grosso with the Healing Journey web series presented by Toivo by Advocacy Unlimited. My guest today is the one and only Mr. JP Sears. JP, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing really good today. I'm delightfully delusional, and that's how I like to be.
That's how I like to be too. So that sets the tone for what I anticipate will be a wonderful interview or conversation. Before we jump into that, I would like to read your bio quickly for the one or two viewers that aren't familiar with you.
I insist that you read it, Chris, and please make sure to throw in plenty of good, like shiny ideas about me. Can you do
Abs-
that for me?
Done and done. No worries.
Good.
JP Sears is an emotional healing coach, an international teacher, world traveler, and curious student of life. His work empowers people to live more meaningful lives. JP presents classes, workshops, online seminars, and leads retreats at numerous locations around the world on inner healing and growth. He is also very active on his YouTube channel, AwakenWithJP. That's a bit of an understatement, where he encourages healing and growth through his entertainingly informative and inspiring videos. JP served as a faculty member for the C.H.E.K Institute from 2006 to 2013. JP holds a certification as a Holistic Coach Advanced Practitioner through the Holistic Coaching Institute in Columbus, Ohio. So once again, Mr. Sears, I welcome you to the program.
Thank you, Chris. And I think that bio, it met my expectations. I now respect myself more than I did before I heard that bio.
Excellent. That's what I like to do, really butter up the guests, read their bio, get them in a good space. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, I apologize. I don't have your bio printed off to read, but I can assure you, I think you're an awesome guy, a great friend, and you're certainly a human being walking your path who I respect just honestly beyond words. In fact, it's so beyond words, speaking of your publisher of your first book, but it's so beyond words, that's why I didn't print your bio.
Well, thank you. I felt that from the heart, which means more. Those of us that are spiritual know that. So thank you, JP. um, but, that really actually brings up something that I want to address right off the bat, because a lot of people know you from your ultra spiritual videos, which are wonderful. They're hilarious. I think a big part of spirituality is humor. And unfortunately, a lot of people I've met don't really have the humor aspect. So I really appreciate that element that you bring in, the lightness, the softness, and poking fun at ourselves. So the other side of that, though, is you're actually one of the most, and I mean this in all sincerity, like one of the most sincerely kind, present, heart-centered people I've ever met. I had seen a number of your videos last year, and then I met you in person earlier this year at a retreat we were both teaching at in Mexico, uh, which was put on by our friend Lee Burton. And we had I feel like we really hit it off, and I'm honored to say our friendship has grown and blossomed since then. But really getting to know you as a person, aside from the ultra spiritual JP, is pretty amazing. And a lot of people don't know that you're a very wise, intuitive, heart-centered individual. So with that as the case, I thought, and for viewers, this is completely unscripted, this conversation. I didn't put any questions together. I wanted to just chat with JP for a little while. So we'll see where this goes. But I kind of wanted to talk about how you got into the coaching that you do, what led you to your path. The name of the show is The Healing Journey. So if you want to talk a little bit about the healing journey and JP, the non-ultra spiritual JP.
Yeah. Yeah, having been blessed with the opportunity to read both of your books, Chris, which I happen to have sitting right here, shameless
And
promotion.
yes, talk more about me, please.
Yes, but having had a chance to read both your books and learn about your journey into the inner wisdom path of spirituality, I would say my journey's been very similar. In a literal sense, it's looked very different, but similar in the sense that Uh, I've got my inner wounds. I've got my shadow self. I've got the things inside that don't feel lovable. I've carried around all sorts of pain my whole life.
Mm.
So much pain that most of the time it was actually numb. So I lived the illusion of like, hey, I'm a pain-free dude. Life is
Right.
good. And I'm just kind of like always flat, just numb. And funny thing about being numb, it takes a while to realize you're numb because the nature of numbness is, hey, I can't feel that I'm actually numb. But lucky for me, I had a significant mentor in my life, came into my life, and really I had my illusions of who I thought I was shattered. And I had my illusions of like how I feel shattered. In other words, I went from numb to like, wow, I can feel something in my heart. And I don't mean to pretend that it was like a snap of the fingers,
Right.
like sitting on the park bench, a pigeon sat next to me, eye contact, and now I'm awakened.
Sure. Yeah.
For me, it covered a lot more linear time. But so my journey, I think, in a nutshell, had to do with having pain and then experiencing enough loss of self through losing myself, denying my pain, which means disconnecting from my heart, that it then motivated me to walk inward. Some wise person somewhere, sometime, at least once said, you have to lose yourself to find yourself.
Right.
And I think the pain of losing myself, which for me registered as like just emptiness. And I don't mean to say just emptiness. I mean, it's really crappy, significant pain.
Yeah.
But that emptiness, that hollowness, like life is just kind of meaningless. That began to motivate me to look into places that I didn't know how to look, which were my heart and soul.
Mm.
And I think just kind of like any newborn animal, like a colt, if you will, it has an inherent ability to walk, but it doesn't know how to walk until it's learning to walk. So I think my looking inward was a very awkward, fumbling around, progressive, weeble wobble legged newborn colt trying to find his way in a world, the inner world, that was very mysterious to me.
Mm. Yeah, that actually really resonates for me as I look back on my own path of healing. And that inward, when we do turn inward, it is a very weeble wobbly kind of thing. I'll often joke like I literally stumbled onto the spiritual path because I did, being an addict at the time in recovery, I was getting my bearings together. But for many years, even after I stepped on, trying to find some solid ground, some solid footing, because it's completely counterintuitive, I found at least, to what we're culturally conditioned towards, and that is, don't get in touch with your pain. You push it away. You don't want to feel it, and so let's grab food, or let's turn the TV on, or let's take a drink or a drug, or play video games. Again, not that there's anything wrong with these things in and of themselves,
Yeah.
but they become a means of aversion. Even spiritual practice can become a huge means of spiritual or aversion to pain. So I certainly relate to that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think the cultural conditioning, family conditioning, just all of that lumped in. It's interesting seeing the reactive modus operandi that it displays when we all bump into, at least I believe we all bump into this sense of, I want more meaning in my life.
Sure. Yeah.
So the cultural conditioning tells us to look for meaning in areas that are inherently meaningless. Like, as you said, turn on the TV, take this drug, take this course, get this degree, make this much money. So we're looking for meaning in places where we're told it is, but it isn't there.
Right.
And I think that has a necessary part of the journey, or it's a necessary part of the
Right.
journey into itself. There's a wonderful story. Maybe it's a parable. I don't know what the word parable means, but it's like a spiritual word I want to use right now.
I dig it.
So there's a parable about the blind gopher. where, God comes in and talks to all the heads of the animal kingdom and says, all these people, they keep coming up to me, bugging me, telling me how awesome it is to feel meaning and purpose in their life. So God says, I want to make it harder for these people to find it because they're bothering me. I want to get some stuff done. So I want to hide it from them. And the lion says, well, why don't you hide it in the jungle? They won't find it there. And God says, no, they'll find meaning and purpose in the jungle. They'll go there. And the dolphin says, why don't you hide it at the bottom of the ocean? And God says, they'll go there. I think they'll find it too easy. Then the owl says, well, why don't you hide meaning on the moon? And God says, I think they'll eventually go there. Then the blind gopher says, well, why don't you hide it inside of them? They'll never find it there. God says, that's it. So I think we're all the blind gopher, in our metaphoric blindness, looking for something that we need. And I do mean need. But we're looking for it in places where it's not. I think our eyes play a tremendous trick on us.
Oh, yeah.
Our eyes point outward. But maybe what we're looking for is the only place where our eyes can't see. There's a wonderful quote by St. Francis of Assisi that says, what you are looking for is what's looking. It's nothing our eyes are pointing at, but what's looking through our eyes is perhaps what the blind gopher would tell us we're looking for.
And that's the trick, is that we are what we are looking for, and that's what makes it so difficult. And in steps the ego, and our sense of self, the physical sense of self, the emotional sense of self. And these are graspable, tangible things that we can latch onto. But then we become stuck in that, and again, not to negate that the physical element is not part of the equation, because of course it is. Nagarjuna, a wonderful Buddhist philosopher, talked about the two truths, the truth of form and the truth of formlessness, or relative and absolute. And the problem is that most of us are only aware of the truth of form, the everything we can see and touch, and again, because it's culturally what we've been conditioned towards. These are graspable, tangible things. But there is another truth happening at all times as well, and that is the truth of the formless and the truth of the unmanifest that gives rise to all form, and that starts from within. That formlessness is within, not without. And that's probably a bit beyond the scope of what we can really go deep into today, but I do believe it's at least worth noting. And the beautiful thing is, all of the great wisdom traditions have their own way of approaching that and exploring that. So I referenced a Buddhist philosopher, but the mystic Christians or the Vedantists and Sufis, they all approach this teaching in a certain way, which is great. But yeah, anyways, a friend of mine, Alana Kaivalya, she's a wonderful yoga teacher, has often signed emails to me, onward and inward. And I like that, onward and inward. So
yeah, I like it. I like that too. For me, the onward aspect of it represents, don't deny the world in which we live. I think, in the beginning days of my spirituality, which when I say that, I'm like, is there just some cynical part of me who says it that way so I can pretend like I'm whatever, Mr. Top of the mountain spirituality.
Right.
Anyway, part of me is delusional enough that probably is probably what I meant. But I know in the beginning days of my spirituality, and lots of people, friends and folks that I've been associated with, gone through the deal about denying the external reality, like the physical, the form, where we look at it and actually kind of judge it to be like a mistake, like this. This form is bad, like enjoy yourself, or have ambition to do well in business, or want to go out and have fun. Like, what the heck is wrong with you? Kind of sets the part of us that gets overly attached to the inward journey. Yes. And I dare say, when we get overly attached to the inward journey, we kind of fall down a hill of a paradox where the inward journey, once we're coming from a place of attachment, our strides to go inward are probably actually taking us further and further outward away from ourselves, while our ego tricks itself or tricks us into believing we're going inward
Right.
while we're actually going outward. Anyway, that's one way I've lost myself.
Yes.
There's so many ways that I've yet to recognize how I've lost myself.
Well said, and same here. But thank you for mentioning that, because going back to those two truths, it's not that one is truer than the other. That's why they are two truths. It's just that you're right. And we have both sides of the coin. The people that just go into the transcendent, this world, like you said, it's a mistake, etc. All form things are bad, samsara, etc. And then you have the people that are kind of, manifest spiritual like stuff, look at me. Finding the balance, I think, with anything in life is the trick. Not negating or denying one or the other, but finding that balance. And because we are here, even if you reach enlightenment, whatever that is, but the Buddha didn't magically disappear. Christ didn't disappear. They were still here. They still got sick. They still felt pain. They were still humans. They still had the human condition, so to speak. So yeah, finding that balance, it's tricky. I feel like it's an ever elusive balance, actually, and I'm yet to find it, but I'm working on it.
Absolutely, and amen to that. And hopefully you're always looking for it, and I hope that I'm always looking for it, because balance. I would dare say that health, whether it's physical health, emotional, mental, spiritual. I guess spiritual for me includes like all of it, everything.
Sure.
But to me, true health is balance, period. It's not one extreme of denying this or embracing that. It's a balance. And I think the dynamic thing about balance is it's always moving. So it's like when you watch a surfer, or if you've ever surfed or ridden a skateboard, things like that. I know you've ridden skateboards.
I have, yes.
Your center of gravity is always changing. So to be balanced, you have to constantly be moving. There's never been someone who's out skating who's in a perfect place of balance.
Yeah.
They're always adjusting. They're always moving. So I think our spiritual center of gravity tends to shift. And I think our deal, the best we can do is realize when it shifts and then move the other way, knowing, hey, this way that I'm moving, it's not going to serve me forever. I'm on the surfboard, I'm leaning too far to the left, my center of gravity is moving outside my body, so I move to the right. But if I just go to the right too much, now I'm out of balance this way, so I've got to go back. So you mentioned I'm going to get a little self-righteous about me here. You mentioned the ultra spiritual comedy videos I do. One of the reasons why I do them, there's many, but one of the reasons is I think the spiritual community is out of balance to the side of the serious. Yeah. So I think doing a little bit of my delusional part to bring the center of gravity closer to the center, a contribution through humor. And I think by all means, if it was the case, and one day it might be, where spirituality is out of balance, where it's like just humor, where people don't have the ability to take it seriously and intimately, then I would dare say bringing the light of kind of like seriousness to it would be a way of bringing balance to it. And I think we all know people in our life, maybe we are those people who won't take anything seriously, will laugh about anything, will laugh about everything. And I think that works against us when we don't know how to not do that, when we don't know how to be serious for a moment. And we probably all know people in our life who only take things seriously. They don't know how to laugh about anything. And I would dare say, if we can become our own vestibular system, if you will, in our psychological and spiritual lives, and just be in the moment and notice where our balance is, and do our best to be unattached, brave enough, courageous enough, and vulnerable enough to lean the other way when it means bringing balance to ourselves.
honor all of those words. I have dealt with some spiritual curmudgeon types, in my walks.
Drudgery, I love that word.
I'm a fan too. But yeah, and that's part of what turned me off to the spiritual path in the very beginning. Was I had this misperception that that's all it was, either the dogma and rigidness of religion, or on the other hand, the very just the overly love and light softness and kind of fluffy watered downness of spirituality. But as I began to explore more, I realized that, of course, there are those people, as you noted, but there are also some others, that are finding some semblance of balance, not perfect, but that can laugh a little bit and that can have fun in the spiritual path, and that it doesn't all always have to be spiritual this, spiritual that, Dhammapada this and Gita that. We can talk about like the Big Lebowski and other stuff that isn't necessarily spiritual, though, there's no shortage of, I'm sure, papers and theories about the spirituality of Lebowski. I mean, there was, of course, the book, The Dude and the Zen Master, and it was a great read. But anyways, we can have balance. We can have fun. We can, spiritual, yes, meditation, yes, but lightness, softness, enjoyment, and leaving some of the curmudgeonness. I don't know if that's an official word, but aside. So, anyways, I would love, JP, to see if you could share maybe either a little teaching or a little practice on, boy, I mean, I know you have no shortage of wonderful teachings and practices. Do you have anything that, say, is roughly 5 to 7 minutes or 3 to 5 minutes, whatever you feel, that can maybe help us integrate some balance, or if there's nothing in that regard, something that you feel in this genre of what we're talking about would be useful for viewers?
Yeah. What comes to mind is a practice that I would call looking for the story under your story. And I'm sure I'm not at all the first person to use that term. I love that storm. I think I meant term. I love the term. Looking for the story under your story. And to me, it's truly a practice of shifting our center of gravity to be a better balanced person in this moment. And I know better balance, that itself is judgmental, which is kind of out of balance. But anyway, to be more balanced in this moment. So I think one of the things from a psychological perspective that takes us out of balance is when we have a story, especially, when we're upset, frustrated, ruffled, afraid, angry, kind of the shadow side stuff. We're experiencing something that's uncomfortable. Attaching to a story, I think, makes us go further and further out of balance. And it is human nature to create a story to justify how we're feeling, why we're feeling, and to create a context of control, really, and understandability of what's going on. So if someone looks at me wrong, I'll create a story about that. First part of my story is they looked at me wrong. In the story under this story, for me, always has a deeper truth. It's a closer calibration to balance. So when we look at our surface story, we basically ask ourselves, what's my story of why I'm upset right now? We have our story, whatever it is. Then our job is to make an assumption, have no assumptions, but let's have an assumption here, that story is just a deflector story. There's something deeper story under that story. What might that be? And when we take a guess at what the story under our story has to say, we let that story be all about us. Our surface story oftentimes is about other people, things, situations, kind of external self, usually. Now we want to take a deeper dive into our inner story. So if someone looked at me with kind of like a weird look like that, I imagine I look handsome when I do that.
Oh, yes.
Chris?
Yes, very, very attractive. Yes.
So if someone gives me a dirty look, surface story, that's a dirty look. Story under that story might be, I don't feel valuable to that person. So instead of me getting angry at them, oh, that inconsiderate person just giving me dirty looks, like what a rude jerk. I'm just losing myself and going out of balance. But if I can have that story, but go beyond it inward, I get deeper to my heart, better balanced when I realize what's really going on inside is I don't feel valued in this moment. Why we want to get to that story is so that we can make space for it, create sort of like an okayness around it, rather than denying that story via worshiping the superficial story. As long as I need to worship that superficial story, I'm leaning towards it. I'm leaning away from me and my truer story about me inside. I'm leaning away from that because it's not comfortable.
Right.
It might not be comfortable to have my superficial story, like, oh, that person's a jerk. Yeah, it's like all serrated, but it's really uncomfortable to connect with. Yeah, based on how I experienced that look, I don't feel valuable right now. Part of me feels worthless. And we make that okay. We practice the art of acceptance and compassion for self, which I think is bringing ourselves back to center. The wise people have always said, nothing is as it seems. We take our first story, nothing is as it seems. So let's go deeper. What could be the story under my story about me? So I'd invite people to test drive that, play with it, see what comes up for you.
I love that. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Yeah.
It reflects a lot on, I think, some of the shadow stuff that I know you and I are both passionate about sharing, and how we have this stuff underneath there that for the most part we're not aware of, hence shadow material, and how it just gets projected out, and it isn't until we begin to re-own this stuff we've just been pushing down that we can really start to get into some healing and really like reintegrating this stuff into our lives in a way that allows us to show up in a more compassionate way for both ourselves and other people. And that's the beauty to me of real spirituality, is cultivating that compassion, that sense of loving kindness, not just for ourselves and not just for other people, but for both. Mm-hmm. And some people have a harder time doing it for themselves. Some people have a harder time doing it for others. So either way, it's a practice. But for me, that's been one of the most beneficial things I've experienced. And that's not to say I'm perfect at it, because I know shortly after we finish, I have to go to the grocery store. And that is something, it's not that I dread, but if I'm not having like a good day, man, like, it's so busy, and there's just so much like for your senses, so many colors and things going on. And I'm a pretty introverted person by nature. I like my space, and I think Bukowski said, it's not that I don't like people, it's just I prefer when they're not around. So I kind of can resonate to a certain extent.
Spoken like a true introvert.
Yes, exactly. But so anyways, I say that because I know, like, here I am talking about this compassion and loving kindness. And on a good day, I'll go into the grocery store and I'll actually be anchored kind of into this heart space where it's easy for me to look at anyone that walks by me and, just kind of beam out that loving kindness. When I'm anchored in there, it's simple. However, there are the not good days, and I wrote about this in Everything Mind, I think, where if I'm not in a good space, like I walk in and I will still fall into the trap of, what are you looking at? Like you're saying earlier, like, really? You're giving me the stink eye? Maybe they are, maybe they're not. But like, just projection. I'm projecting my own discomfort or whatever I'm experiencing, and it's all out on other people rather than owning it and working on it. So that's why, that practice is wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, looking at the story under my story, or any other shadow work practices, which there are no shortage of. There's a lot of great books, a lot of great material, and I know we both talk in our videos about some of that, so I would recommend people to check out JP's YouTube channel, which we'll have linked here in this webcast. And I guess maybe this is a nice way, JP, to segue right into our wrapping things up, was there anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to cover, with the exception of course, I'm going to ask where people can find you, but was there anything regarding the healing journey that you want to share?
It just, I think, you probably heard my dog shaking here. That
Oh,
means no. That's
okay.
his interpretive language. I would just like to stress again, with slightly different words, how, in my opinion, how powerful beneficial acceptance is.
Mm.
Not in having respect for the shadow side means not just accepting what's easy to accept about ourselves. I think that's easy acceptance. It's a little bit of the picture, but not the whole picture. But to me, the real just grinding into the mud of vulnerability in the human soul is doing our best to accept what does not feel acceptable about us.
Mm.
That to me is the challenge, and it's also the reward.
I love that. And may I see your final statement and raise you a Thich Nhat Hanh quote in which he says, "No mud, no lotus." One of his favorite famous quotes, one of my favorites, by which, I believe he means that our best selves can grow from these most difficult times. And so yeah, to with a compassionate heart walk into these places of uncomfortableness, of uncertainty, of pain, and uh, displeasure, but doing so in a way that we understand that that's where the healing comes from. So, Mr. Sears, where can we find you online and learn all about your wonderful online coaching and programs and retreats and all this great stuff?
Yeah, well, I think the best place people can find me is on my YouTube channel, Awaken with JP. I'm always putting up new videos. It's, in my opinion, an engaging place. So I'd love to connect with you there. And all my other social media handles are at Awaken with JP. So I'd invite people to just connect with me there. I love meeting people. I love hearing people's perspectives on a piece of work that I put out there, whether they agree, and certainly if they disagree. I love to hear from my audience, connect with them.
Mm.
So, and for you, Chris, thank you for having me be a part of this discussion. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
And it's always a pleasure to hear you talk about what a pleasure it is to speak with me. So thank you for that.
I can't raise you any more pleasure.
See, I've been talking to you too much. But anyways, no, honestly, yes. Thank you, JP. You're a dear friend, a brother, and I'm so grateful to call you that and have you in my life and for your time. This is a really important series to me that I'm doing with a really important group of people. Again, Tuevo by Advocacy Unlimited. Wonderful people doing really important work in the community here in Connecticut. So we thank you for your time. And again, viewers, all of the links for JP will be on this webcast, so check them out. And please do visit JP. He's an amazing guy who I'm honored to call a friend. So thank you, JP.
You're welcome, my brother.